Hi, I just wondered whether your views of the British monarchy changed at all during the course of making the film. That's to all of you.
Helena, perhaps you'd like to start off on that.
No. No. Expand.
Don't have to.
Put it this way. Yeah. No, I would say that I was unaware. I just kind of vaguely knew that he had a stammer. I was unaware to the extent and how chronic it was. So what I think this film shows is a whole completely new angle or fresh angle on a very famous period in history for us, the abdication. And that the abdication and it came very close to a proper crisis in the monarchy. So the pressure on this man and the personal crisis, that was totally new to me. And I also think it's interesting. It's a story about the most reluctant king, somebody who doesn't want to be king. And actually, I suspect Edward VIII didn't want to be king either. So it's the duty, the responsibility, the sheer just hugeness of the job. I certainly would never want to be royal, but even though I effortlessly am at times. In fact, that was partly why I did play it, because I knew I could indulge in being queen. Yeah. And yeah. And he was king, queen, Mr. King, Mr. Queen, and we could behave outrageously, and it would be accepted. Oh, they're just getting into a part. In fact, I've played a few queens lately, and they are really enjoyable. I just do queens. So it's enjoyable to put it on, pretend, but then you can take the crown off, sling it off across the room. You don't have to be the nice, smiling front. She, the Queen Mother, was extraordinary because she was a professional public figure and expert at it. But she had the character and the confidence. I think she married a man who was not born to be king and wasn't really constitutionally meant to be king in his, just in the way he was built. So if you get that, and then you have to do a job that you're not suited to. But luckily, I think he drew upon her confidence to where he lacked it, and it was a really true partnership and a sort of symbiotic thing going on. I mean, she was the classic woman behind the man. Sadly, it wasn't called the Queen's Speech; it was the King's Speech, and it's about the man behind the man. And then in the background, I'm just,
Geoffrey, as a colonial from a country that has rather mixed feelings about the monarchy, does it warm you more to the monarchy, or does it change any thoughts? I mean, you're the most unknown character in a sense, but yet possibly the most key character in bringing George VI to life.
Yes, I've always had an intriguing and fascinating obsession with the whole dynasty of British royalty back a millennia and a bit, because I find the complexity of the history and the shaping of the various houses and, sometimes bloody passing on of weird claimed lineage. And I suppose that, the House of Windsor, which is still with us, is, it was, to me, the first sort of reality TV show, I think, because they became a family. I remember the first time they let the cameras into the palace, which must have been in the late 60s, early 70s. It was a sort of at home with the Windsors, which was probably the beginning of the demystifying. I just find all that intriguing. I'd like my country to be a little bit more adult and independent, but I do find the presence of royalty and monarchy in contemporary life still intriguing.
Over in the corner, yeah.
Okay. It's a wonderful script, wonderful witty script, and there are some fantastic characters, especially not Lionel. I was wondering how much of it is true, how much of it did you have to fill in the blanks, and how did you fill in the blanks?
Tom?
I'm sure everyone knows about the royal family, their ability to control the flow of information out from the palace is pretty formidable, and I'm sure any of you press who've tried to get views from the royal family will probably have discovered that. So I think that reflects our ability to tell their stories even when it's a few decades later. I mean, the most valuable source for us, which was these diaries, Lionel only started writing the diary when he became king. In other words, when the king was plain old Duke of York, I don't think Lionel realised that this was particularly noteworthy in terms of posterity, which is quite interesting in terms of the sense of the Duke of York standing. I think when he became king, the penny dropped, and Lionel thought, "Oh my God, I better start keeping a diary." So we have an account of that. But even in the diaries, which are being published later in the year, he's still incredibly careful not to talk too much about the detail of what's happening in the therapy. And for me, the things that I got out of it were dialogue. So, for example, at the end of the speech, when Lionel says to the king, "You still stammered on the W," and the king says, "Well, I had to throw in a fuse so they knew it was me." That's a direct quote from the diaries. I mean, that was last spoken out loud by King George VI and Lionel Logue. So in terms of where the therapy comes from, I mean, the content of therapy scenes, really that comes out of David Siler's imagination. But if he has a strong claim on understanding therapy in that period, it's because he was born in 1937. He had a terrible stammer as a child, and he went through therapy initially in England and then also in America in the 40s and early 50s. So it was 10, 15 years after the period where Lionel Logue was practicing. So things like the swearing technique, which I'm often asked, would that have happened? We don't know whether that would have happened, but the interesting thing is that was a technique that was used with David in the 1940s.
And it helped him, I think.
And it was the breakthrough, and it was an incredibly powerful and helpful thing. I mean, in terms of the B plot, which is the therapy plot. I think the film is as much a personal exploration of David, the way David overcame stammering, because we don't have, because of confidentiality, we don't have, intimate details. But the A plot, the historical plot, is obviously very well documented. The abdication is very well documented, and I'd probably say that the key shift in the script is to compress the chronology, because Logue and Bertie met each other for a while before the abdication in reality, and we compressed it in order to create the ticking clock of the abdication, because otherwise, and in fact, I did force David to rewrite the script to obey historical chronology, and it had a first act where the two guys met with absolutely no pressure that he would ever have to be anything other than the Duke of York, and I turned around to David and said, "I've just made your script worse, I'm very sorry," but I had to do it, to see if a more historical chronology could work. So, it's a mixture of imagination and fact.